Welcome back, my friends. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a fantastic lunch. As we get set to kick things off this afternoon, we're just going to leave a couple minutes, a minute or two, to ensure that we all get back in. I know some of us would have needed an additional time to reheat the lunch of yesterday. You know what I mean? That's how it is. Nothing wrong with that. That's how we Caribbean people do. Yeah? We cook yesterday, we eat tomorrow. That's how it is. My friends, I have to say congratulations. I was actually sitting off camera, but thoroughly enjoying myself as I took a look at the spirited CANTO Bingo. And that has been the first installment of CANTO Bingo, and people are already saying, make it a feature of all CANTO events. Well, that's another story. You get the opportunity to provide that sort of feedback at the end of this event. Yep. So congratulations to all the winners, and a special thank you to our official CANTO Bingo host, Ms. Lizelle Douglas. Yes, I think she did a fantastic job. I understand the producers out in Hollywood have already started to contact her. So feel free to call me. I'm her agent. She would have just found that out, but that's fine. We'll keep it going like that, yeah? So a little entertainment. Those of you who missed the morning session, you missed a treat. We had a bit of comedy. We had some very, very interesting, engaging presentations. We had Stephen, the mixologist. He was there doing his usual do and providing a special fare for us that we can actually go back to get the ingredients, and I'm sure the team at CANTO would make sure that that recipe is placed on the CANTO side. Dahlia Harris out of Jamaica, she spent some time with us talking about the new way of connecting within the restrictions of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we found a bit of laughter in there as well. So now we're getting ready to start the afternoon segment. We have our first panel discussion. Let me tell you how we're going to do it. I will introduce the first of three speakers. That person would present, then I take you through the other two one by one, and then I bring them all back together where we can have a bit of a Q&A. So whilst those presentations are happening, take note, make your questions, your comments, your concerns, and then you get the opportunity to engage the panel at the end of the exercise. So let's move on into the presentation, the first segment, the first panel discussion of CANTO Connect 2. This afternoon, we're going to take a look at how Caribbean operators are preparing for the 5G revolution. Leading the charge, we have our keynote speaker. He is Mr. Tim Burke, the VP, Technology and Products of CW Communications. Mr. Burke, the screen is yours.
All right. Thanks for that introduction. Really appreciate it. My presentation will be about 5G. It'll be both an educational primer as well as a reality check on 5G. And I've been involved in 5G development, technology development for many years now. And it's really exciting, very exciting to see the developments, both in deployments, the technology and rollouts. And I'll go through what we're seeing around the world. First off, a little bit about Liberty Latin America. I work for Liberty Latin America. As you probably know, we operate in over 25 markets around the region, Latin America and Caribbean, about $5 billion in revenues. And this includes, the revenues we're getting from our recent acquisition of AT&T Puerto Rico. And our brands, Flow, BTC in the Bahamas, Cable and Wireless, UTS. So we have a number of different brands throughout the region in the Caribbean. So we have about 4.5 million subscribers right now, and that's with the AT&T Puerto Rico acquisition, about 3,700 cell sites. And we're growing. When you add the Costa Rica Telefonica business we'll be buying here, hopefully in the next couple months, that'll bring it up to about 5,000 cell sites and almost 6 million subscribers. So we're really growing. We're very proud of our mobile business. Our fixed business is growing as well. 6 million subscribers, 8 million homes passed. Particularly proud of our fiber to the home deployments in many of the regions and countries around our region. We also have a submarine cable business, cable and wireless wholesale business that connects all these countries throughout the region. So a very robust business market as well. So let's get to 5G now. There's a lot of articles and press about 5G, so it is kind of confusing. The first thing to really understand about 5G is there's a lot of different use cases and applications. It means many things to many different people. Probably the primary use cases you're seeing on this chart here is mobile broadband. So basically enhancing that mobile broadband that we've known and come to love in 4G LTE. Even in 3G we had it, and so 5G enhances that mobile broadband. So that's a major use case. The other use case that gets a lot of play is the fixed wireless access use case. And that's basically the belief that 5G could someday maybe replace fixed technologies like DSL and that sort of thing. We'll talk a little bit about that. The other use case is private enterprise. So this is like factory floors where you use 5G for automation and things like that. And that's a use case that's getting some play as well. The Internet of Things, sensors all over the place, whether they're monitoring water meters or street lighting or tracking and tracing, container shipping or pets and people and kids. So these are all the use cases. I'm going to focus in on that upper left-hand corner use case, mobile broadband, and the enhancements of the 4G mobile broadband to 5G. All right, so what are the key enablers? What are the key technology enablers that help 5G really make a difference? Well, we're talking about spectrum. Spectrum isn't something you can see, in the electromagnetic range. You have light, and represented by this double rainbow here, and you can see light. Can't see the radio spectrum that we operate in. So what's happening is this spectrum is becoming available in larger and larger chunks and pipes. It's interesting, back in the 2G world, the building block for that technology was 0.2 megahertz. And then in 3G, it went to 5 megahertz. Then in 4G, it went to 20 megahertz. And now in 5G, it's even bigger chunks of spectrum, 100 megahertz chunks. And it's just like plumbing. The bigger the pipe you have, the more water you can throw down it. The bigger the pipe you have in spectrum and radios that activate the spectrum, the more bits, the more ones and zeros you can put down on those pipes, the higher speeds customers get. So the other thing that's really enabling with 5G is spectral efficiency. Spectral efficiency is the concept of bits, how many ones and zeros you can put on a given megahertz. Megahertz is the unit of measure of spectrum. And so these technologies have constantly been improved and allowed for more bits per unit of spectrum, a hertz, right? In 4G, it was about 3 bits per hertz. It triples to 8 or 9 bits per hertz when you go to 5G. Just like when we went from 3G to 4G, it tripled from about 1 bit per hertz to 3. Now, the interesting thing about 5G is the spectral efficiency varies by the size of the bandwidth, by the size of the pipe. So if you had a 100 megahertz pipe, it might be 9 bits per hertz. You go to a 400 megahertz pipe, it might go to 10 or 15 bits per hertz. Just more bang for the buck, more bits down those pipes. So those are the enabling technologies. So spectrum is very important. A little bit of a primer here on spectrum. You see on the left-hand side of the screen, 1 gigahertz. That's about the range where cellular frequencies are operated, since the beginning of cellular time. A little bit to the left of that 1 gigahertz, the 850, 900 megahertz. A little bit to the right, the 2.1 gigahertz, the 1.9 gigahertz. And that's been in relatively small blocks of spectrum that's been available for operators. And, right now we're using it for 4G and 3G and even some 2G. And we basically reallocate that spectrum. We refarm it. And you can refarm that spectrum to 5G. Or we can get new spectrum in that, where you see that 3.5 gigahertz, 100 megahertz blocks of the 3.5. Very much a sweet spot for 5G technology, those big chunks of spectrum. Or way up high in the frequency range as you go to the right to that millimeter wave, 38, 40 gigahertz, okay? And you can get even larger blocks of spectrum, 400 and 800 chunks of spectrum there, all right? So the key thing to remember is these technologies, whether it's 1G, 2G, 3G, or 5G, they're spectrum agnostic. You can have 5G operate on the millimeter wave, or you can have it operate on the very low 850 megahertz spectrums, way over to the left there. And what was used for 4G or 3G or even 2G could now be used for 5G. All right, another thing about spectrum is these lower frequencies, the signal can go a long distance without losing energy. So you can, in the old days, back in the 80s when I was putting in 1G systems, we'd put a 300-foot tower, we'd blast a 900 megahertz signal, and we get 20, 30 miles of coverage, right? Then as we came out and got these higher frequencies and more of it, which was good, we'd have to power down and bring the sites lower, and it would be lower coverage, right, as you're seeing here. And then we'd get some more spectrum, we'd even higher frequencies, even lower coverage, but larger capacities, better speeds for customers. And it gets even smaller, down to the tune of a half a kilometer when you get up to the 3,500, 3.5 gigahertz frequencies. When you get to the millimeter wave frequencies, it gets even smaller. You got to be at street level for these sort of cell sites, on a lamp post or light post. If you can get 100, 200 meters, it's a good day. And you're not penetrating buildings. These very high frequencies can't go through buildings and that sort of thing. Have trouble through trees even. So you'll see that in the millimeter wave. So there's differences in these frequencies, the low versus high. It's very important. All right. I don't know if you saw this article, came out in the Washington Post a couple months ago. Really interesting article. The 5G Live, the network of the future is still slow. The Post tested 5G phones against 4G ones. America's new nationwide 5G networks weren't much faster, and in some places they were slower. Interesting article. I recommend you all read it. What's happening here? Well, I had a friend of mine, he said in Miami, I said, go out and test this, would you please? So he went out there, got a 5G phone, was on the T-Mobile network, got 25 megabits per second. Same speeds he was getting on 4G. The article itself kind of does a comparison across 125 markets across the United States. What are they seeing? The 5G phones are getting the same speed as the 4G phones. In AT&T, 45 megabits per second. Same thing on T-Mobile, 20, 25 megabits per second. Didn't matter whether it was a 5G or 4G phone. Let me explain why this is happening. So mobile operators are able to deploy and activate 5G in fairly moderate, amount of costs and using existing spectrum. What they do is they just reallocate an existing band of spectrum, say in the lower 850 megahertz frequencies, and they put 5G on it. And 5G is actually a very similar standard and specification to 4G. So it allows you to combine it, and you don't even know. The customer's lamp lights, it shows 5G. They're getting a little bit of 5G, say on those lower frequencies, but most capacity and speed is coming from technology. It allows you to combine things. They're getting 5G, and they are getting 5G. And also in the mobile core, the brains and the data center that kind of runs these networks, it's just a software load onto an existing sort of mobile core platform. So you can relatively easily, I should say, get it. So you can tell as a customer, all your friends, I have a 5G phone. And your knowledgeable friends will just kind of wink and nod and say, yeah, I know you got 5G, but the speeds are about the same as 4G. And operators can tell their analyst friends, hey, I got 5G. And the knowledgeable analysts say, well, you do have 5G, but not much difference. And this is what's happening, and this is the explanation of that Washington Post article. But there is things that can happen that are going to make it better. So, for instance, Verizon in the United States is spending a lot of money, and they're using these very high millimeter wave frequencies that I talked about a little bit earlier, the 38 gigahertz, and with large chunks of spectrum. And with this, they can get amazing speeds, gigabit per second speeds. Now, they got to spend a lot of money on a lot of sites, because remember I mentioned it doesn't go very far in distance when you're at those high millimeter wave frequencies, right? But you do get some great speeds. So you can tell your customers, hey, I'm getting 20 times the speeds of other people, of 4G, and you really are. But a knowledgeable customer will say, or a friend will say, yeah, but you're not getting it very often because you got to be sitting right in front of the tower there, really close outside, And same thing when you tell the operators tell their friends as well. And it is very expensive. It takes a lot of CapEx to deploy. But you do have 5G. You do have awesome speeds. In fact, here's a study from OpenSignal. It's kind of an independent third party that does drive tests and speed tests out there in the field. And they tested Verizon. And they found that the Verizon 5G on this millimeter wave frequency was getting those speeds less than 1% of the time. Okay, so, you know, how useful is it? Not a game changer. Now, when you were outside the car, you know, 30 feet away from that, you know, lamppost that had the 5G millimeter wave site, it was smoking speeds, gigabits per second. Now, when you went in the car, remember I said not only does not go very far distance, you know, with these millimeter wave frequencies, but they don't penetrate walls or the glass and you know, metal in a car, and it dropped to 800. You go in a house, you'd be lucky if you get a signal at all at these millimeter wave frequencies. So not a game changer for that. What is a game changer? Well, there are viable 5G deployments. They're going to be coming. It's down the road a little bit, and they're expensive. So what you do is you get new spectrum in the low frequencies, say 20 megahertz at the 600 megahertz band, right? You kind of combine it with 100 megahertz of that 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, that kind of sweet spectrum, contiguous spectrum, nice big blocks, right? You have to add a mobile core that's a now dedicated 5G, we call it standalone core, and you're going to get some really compelling speeds. And the operators get some really compelling. This time there's no Lincoln and Schroeder. Operator tells an analyst they got 5G, they really do, and you got some smoking speeds and smoking capacities. But it does cost money to do that at a fair amount. In fact, these are some of the speeds you can get. You know, with this combination I talked about, you're talking 500, 600 megabits per second. Really, really nice. And you don't have to be just 20 feet away from the cell site, like in the millimeter wave Verizon scenario. So it does look promising. It will come. It will be here. We really do love 5G, but it's got to be one of these, you know, more mature deployments to really make a difference. All right, now handsets. Handsets are very important. Some really good news on 5G handsets. Almost 200 different phones are out there that are 5G capable handsets from almost 100 vendors. So the ecosystem is large and growing. I'm very encouraged by it. I've never seen growth in it like I'm seeing here so quickly. In fact, one area that's really impressive is the speed in which the economics of these handsets is coming down. We're seeing right now, and this is a report from Smartphone Analysis from later last year, you know, we're seeing 60% of the volume from China is less than $400 a phone. Very, very good for this early in the development cycle of a new technology. In fact, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, see the green area there? You're seeing about 20% of the phones from 5G phones from China below $200. Not quite so much for Latin America and North America, but it's going to get there. And so, you know, if we can get, that's really going to help the rollouts of 5G. So the ecosystem is large. It's grown quickly. Prices are coming down quicker than I expected. There's a lot of chip manufacturers, 5 or 6, making these 5G chips. Really, really exciting. Now, one thing about the phones, another thing is it is complicated. It's complicated for an operator. There's a lot of different combinations of frequencies. There's so many different frequencies that are 5G, 4G, and combining them together. It makes your choices for an operator on the handsets pretty interesting. There's also this really nice capability where you can set up your network where it can work on a given amount of spectrum, 4G or 5G. Very, very nice and powerful. It's called dynamic spectrum sharing, but it does make it confusing on the handset configuration whether it has that capability. There's also this combining effect. I mentioned this bonding, you know, the 600 megahertz, you know, 5G with the 3.5 gigahertz 5G or 4G, many, many different combinations. Those choices add another level of complexity on handsets. And then I mentioned, you know, a pure standalone 5G only mobile core versus a mobile core called non-standalone. That is a combination of 5G and 4G. You have to decide on that as a handset manufacturer. So there's many choices for procurement and sourcing, makes it complicated, can hurt a little bit on the volumes for an operator. All right, so look at this is one of our markets, and the exponential growth we're seeing in mobile traffic historically over the last 2 or 3 years, and then it's continuing in the projections, and you can just see that growth. The other thing that's happening is that, and this is good for consumers, this is good for all our customers, is the price per gigabyte is going down to the tune of what, over 60%, right? And so. And this is, you know, 2 comparable plans over a 3-year period, 2017 and 2020. And you see the price went up a little bit, but they're getting a lot more gigabytes consumption capability, you know, in those plans. So these 2 factors are hitting our markets, and it makes it very problematic. First off, how do you meet that, you know, growth in consumption? Well, there's really only 3 ways, you know, from a network provider of meeting that. You got to add more mobile sites, right? Or you get new spectrum and add more radios and activate, you know, that new spectrum. Or you add new technologies like 5G or these advanced antenna techniques like MIMO type stuff that give you better spectral efficiency, that bits per hertz that I talked about. So those are the 3 ways of adding capacity. Now, all 3 options, you know, increase the cost, both the capital expenditures as well as the operational expenses. As you can imagine, adding new sites, you know, you need the leases, the power, so on and so forth, as well as the capital for the towers and building those sites. Spectrum, unfortunately, is getting expensive. You know, it's not going down to 64% year over year like the prices, you know, operators are getting, you know, on the revenue side. And then obviously to activate and deploy this new spectrum and use it, you need to add radios and antennas, and that costs some money. Then there's this refarming. One great way of adding new technology is refarming to a 5G, even from 3G to 4G. And so introducing these new technologies not only costs money on the spectrum piece, but obviously costs money on the radios, and then the handsets. I mean, we have a lot of 2G, certainly 3G handsets in our market. So, you know, helping customers and subsidizing that and getting those handsets changed out to 5G handsets or even LTE handsets can cost some money. So operators, you know, really need to have decreasing costs and higher revenues, you know, in order to have some economics and a business case that allows for these new technologies and for just the natural consumption and capacity needs that are happening out there. So bottom line is the deployment of 5G is going to be difficult in some of these lower ARPU, average revenue per user countries, and where spectrum costs are high. We have full 5G in Puerto Rico as part of our AT&T acquisition, but that's a ARPU country that's 6 to 7 times what many of the countries are in our region in the Caribbean and Latin America. All right, so enough of economics. I'm going to have my last slide here, and that kind of summarizes everything. And mobile broadband. 5G technology is here, but it does need time to evolve. All right, that's number 1 as a summary. Easier, as the Washington Post article, easy for operators to have 5G service, but is it just like LTE? We want to have a more compelling, differentiable product. Millimeter wave, that's the Verizon way of doing it. I don't know if during the Super Bowl, if anyone was watching, you saw the Verizon ads, they were talking about this millimeter wave technology. High speeds, wonderful, but how practical is it? How often can you actually get those speeds? So large blocks of spectrum are needed, you know, and contiguous spectrum to be a true differentiator on 5G. And that mid-band spectrum, that 2.5 gigahertz, 3.5 gigahertz, contiguous spectrum, seems to be a real sweet spot for 5G. But, you know, to activate it does require, you know, some capital for radios, and obviously you need to purchase these.
Giovanni King, my friends, he's the 3rd presenter in this segment. Giovanni King, Bureau of Telecommunications and Post, Curacao. Giovanni, are you ready to join us?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
There you go. Could you try sharing your screen?
I just did. I hope you guys can see it.
I am looking at the reaction from my technical team, and they're giving me the affirmative thumbs up. So, Giovanni, thank you for standing in the ready position. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you, CANTO, for allowing us the opportunity to participate today and to giving our perspective on how we think the regulatory approach to basically support this transition into 5G should or could be looked at from a Curacao perspective, of course. So first of all, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this already. Bureau of Telecommunications and Posts is the multi-sector regulator in Curacao. We regulate telecom sector, postal sector, utilities, the airport, and fuel pricing, just for a little background there. If we look at some of the requirements and features of 5G that regulators would need to take into consideration, of course, I'm not going to look into all, and I'm very happy for the previous presenter because we got a lot of technical details, which basically also indicated what we as regulators need to be looking at in order to support our operators to make this transition and to enable or allow us as users to get the benefits of this introduction into 5G. With the introduction, as indicated by the previous presenter, there are very radical changes as it comes to the network infrastructures if you compare them to our previous mobile networks. And these are the elements and things that we would need to look into as regulators in order for us to be proactive and to assist and to help these developments to take on. One of the things that we have seen based on all the documentation out there is that one of the requirements is that there is going to be a big need for fiber deployment deep into the network, which will facilitate all of the benefits that were mentioned by the previous presenter as well. We are looking at small cell densification. This would allow us to achieve lower latency, increased throughput, improved reliability, and better coverage of the network. And this, of course, goes hand in hand with all of these different uses of spectrum, as Tim has indicated in the previous presentation. One of the additional aspects of 5G that basically as regulators we're going to have to look at how we're going to deal with it is network slicing. With network slicing, what you basically get is that the network can be divided up into different logical networks, which each network giving a service a particular service level, if you want, in order to say it differently. But by doing so, we basically also see that with this introduction, you get a little bit of attention into something that we have been fighting for the last years, where we have indicated that when we're looking at access to the internet, there should be net neutrality, indicating that all services that are making use of this infrastructure should be treated equally. But by doing network slicing, what you get is that there can be different service levels for each particular service. As Tim has indicated, for instance, when you're looking at IoT type services or any other critical type of service that you would like to provide over this infrastructure, you would basically need and want to get this differentiation so that the services could be provided at a better quality of service. But by doing so, there is where you get the tension between what we as regulators have been preaching for the last years and now what the technologies allow us to do, even on in order to guarantee that the consumer will have a better quality experience as well. So how do we look at it in Curacao? First and foremost, when we're looking at fiber deployment deeper into the network, and we consider it a requirement to get that 5G network in order to get that availability and connectivity that we want, because we think that through using fiber, you will get access to a better connectivity and broader, higher speeds guaranteed, because you will not have to deal with all of the issues that are relating with connecting all of your base stations using different forms of frequencies or microwaves, if you want. So if we're looking at fiber rollout, and we're looking at Curacao as a small island, one and limited numbers of households, and all of these things that you need to take into consideration, one of the things that we believe is that we need to create a certain level of efficiency in order to guarantee that the operators can get a reasonable return on their investment, so that it would promote the investment in the infrastructure and all of the radios, as Tim indicated, that need to be purchased in order for us to roll out or build these 5G networks, and for them to meet the expectations that we are basically foreseeing that they could provide us with. One of the things that we think that is a requirement that is that we need to have this fiber infrastructure, which is an open infrastructure, allowing all of the operators that are making use of it to not need to reinvest or to create a second fiber network, but in order to share, if we want, all of the passive infrastructure elements, so that they could reduce their costs, and by doing so, maybe use certain income to build out their network in areas where normally they wouldn't be keen to go from the initial rollout. So as a policy perspective, so government, how are we going to do this? How are we going to facilitate the rollout of a open single fiber infrastructure with everybody sharing all passive elements of the network, and looking as we move up into the network, how to facilitate cooperation and collaboration with active elements within the network, so that you can get a competitive environment when it comes to the providing of services on top of this infrastructure. One of the other elements that I have mentioned, and was mentioned by Tim as well, is that we're going to have densification of cell sites, because we're using higher frequencies, and because of the consequences of using these higher frequencies. So one of the elements here that is of importance is, like, how are we going to guarantee, again, as part of cost reduction in network rollout, is again one of the elements that we have been discussing for years, is about how are we going to do site sharing, how are we going to guarantee that people don't basically duplicate what has already been built, use these facilities in a more efficient way by doing so, by sharing instead of rebuilding something that already exists. Getting government involved to see how other aspects of infrastructure that are, let's say, public infrastructure can be used to guarantee, again, that the rollout is more efficient and cost effective as much as we can. One of the elements that technology provides us today is to see if we could do spectrum sharing. I'm sure, and I know that this isn't one of the things that is easily done, but I think that we need to have within our new legislations the forms that would enable or allow the operators to do so, especially when they can get together and figure out how they can do it without creating additional interference, and with every place where technology would allow us to do so in an efficient and effective manner. Different frequency bands have been mentioned that are new, up and coming, that has been basically coordinated or discussed during most recent ITU radio WARC, World Radio Conference. So what Curacao has been doing, of course, is based on the outcome of these meetings. We're looking at all of these frequencies and what they're being used for today. And if they are not being used, then we make sure that measurements are continually executed, so that we know that the frequencies are clean, for that at the moment that our operators are ready to make the request, that we could assign them to them, so not to prevent them to move in the speed that they want to move forward with when it comes to the deployment of the network. One of the additional aspects of making the frequencies available is coordination with our neighbors, because everybody has the opportunity to use all of their frequencies, and because of that, we need to consider how, especially the lower frequency bands, how they travel across open water and what their effects or impact is on the different neighboring countries. One of the elements that we in Curacao need to consider is Venezuela, because of where the towers are placed, sometimes at the coast at a higher location, they very easily propagate over to our side of the ocean, and as a result, we have a negative impact. We have very good working relationship with our Venezuelan counterparts, so we hope that that wouldn't become an issue when we reach that point. Now, the aspect of network slicing, which is a little bit of a, let's say, a tension that I spoke of between our previous approach of guaranteeing network neutrality, and now that the network itself is able to be divided up into different logical elements, which as a result, operators can provide services at a higher service level, especially when it comes to, for instance, critical services that you would want to provide. If we look at a service as telemedicine, for instance, you wouldn't want a certain higher latency, if you want, that when somebody is performing one form of procedure, that all of a sudden, you know, midway procedure, there is some form of freezing or any other form of disruption that could have a negative impact on the result of such a operation. Basically, this is just text where I just indicated again where the tension is. So within our approach, we now need to look at all of these elements. How do we prepare and what do we need to do in order to guarantee that we are proactively making changes that would allow the operators to make the transition? So in 2017, the Bureau of Telecommunications proposed a new legal framework to government. In this framework, all of the elements that I've mentioned were basically taken into consideration. So one, that we are moving forward with a single infrastructure, fiber-based, that is open, which allows for sharing of all of the passive network elements, and moving up into the hierarchy of the infrastructure, there will be competition at the active level and at the service level within the new proposed infrastructure. Of course, coordination of spectrum, because having spectrum, as Tim has indicated in the previous presentation, is a requirement to build the infrastructure that would allow for lower latency, higher capacity, and all of these things. So we need to make sure that the spectrum is available. We need to make sure that the spectrum is interference-free, because we want to give the operators these contiguous, broader or bigger chunks of spectrum, because just like in any other developed country, we want the same level of service here as we were expecting in the developed countries as well. Within the legislation, again, enabling the construction of that single open access fiber infrastructure, sharing of passive elements of the networks. I'm talking about towers and all of the other passive elements that could enable or facilitate cost-effective deployment of such an infrastructure. And as a result, again, what we're trying to do with this new legislation is basically addressing all changes that we need to take into consideration for the rollout of 5G. And with that, I think those are the points that we need to take into consideration. And of course, for later on, I'm happy and I'm still going to be around to answer questions if I didn't touch all of the points that a regulator should be looking at when facilitating the rollout of 5G. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. And thank you very much, Giovanni. I know we tossed you in there. Thank you very much for that insightful presentation, a modern approach, a modern regulatory approach to 5G. So I think we're ready now to welcome Mike Antonius back into the fray. He's the third and final presenter in this segment, the first panel discussion after the lunch break. Mike, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Let's check if my screen is ready too.
Yeah. I'm hearing you loud and clear, so that's a good sign.
That's very good. Let's see if... Seeing my screen?
And I've just received the thumbs up, and I'm seeing the screen myself. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I will focus on how Caribbean operators are preparing for the 5G revolution, and that from an operator's perspective. For some of the parts of the presentation, I will put my screen, my video out, and for other parts, I will do my video on. So if you don't see me, that is because I just want you to be able to hear me loud and clear. An operator's journey. You know, some question that people often address to me is, why 5G now? Why, as a Caribbean operator, you come with 5G now? If you look at our roadmap towards 4G, it is not at the beginning, and also the other generations, it is not at the beginning of when they were launched that we as an operator introduced that service as well. But in this case with 5G, we're in the beginning stage. We launched our service on the 25th of November last year. And I can answer this question that people address to me, why 5G now, in several ways. But it gave me some time to do some reflection. And it brought me back, all the way back to the first industrial revolution. And you would ask, okay, Mike, are you going a bit too far back? But the reason I did the reflection in that way is to know in which time are we now? And looking back, coming from the first industrial revolution, we realized how water and steam power were used to mechanize production. And in the second industrial revolution, it used electric power to create mass production. The third used electronics and information technology to automate production. And the fourth is building on the third. And having said that, now in the fourth industrial revolution, the digital revolution has been occurring. And that has been occurring since the past century, in the last decade of the past century. It is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between physical, digital, and biological spheres. Very interesting times. And to be able to perform in these interesting times and to be able to attract foreign investors, especially at the stage where Suriname is right now, we need to have what these foreign investors are also accustomed to. But my reflection continued. It continued, and I've been looking at what have we been doing in CANTO? What have we been doing in CANTO with regard to what have we been telling our members in the past decade? And which dialogue have we created? Looking back, I found an interesting presentation of our Secretary General. It was in 2010 when she mentioned the digital divide that exists between developed and developing countries, and it is not limited to access of ICT services. Very interesting that she mentioned the part of the digital divide. There is a large digital divide between the developed and the developing countries. And ever since, we have been telling our members, every conference focusing on another topic, to focus on digital transformation. In 2012, we told our members, transforming the way we live. And we continued in 2013 towards a smart broadband Caribbean community and to build strategic alliances for sustainable broadband development in 2013. It all came down to improving lives through broadband innovations and inspiring ICT innovations. This is what we have been creating dialogue on in the past years. Looking at 2017, and I think most of you must remember this one, you have been visiting CANTO, reimagining ICT as a tool for national broadband, for national growth and development. And when we look at these challenging times we're in right now, when especially how we are struggling with things like e-education, distance learning, then we see how important ICT is as a tool, especially with regard to education. Guiding digital adoption to lead the global market was a very ambitious one, because actually from a Caribbean perspective, we need that digital adoption to be part of that global market, but we wanted to lead it. And in 2019, transitioning into a digital region, opportunities and threats. Well, these reflections, I was inspired by it at looking at how have we made enough progress, the time that we have been elaborating and discussing and creating dialogue on these topics. And if you look at the situation right now during the pandemic, then we have a reality check. We have a reality check, we have improved, but still we realize that it is a lot more for improvement. So I have not only been looking at what the CANTO is doing and the dialogue we have been discussing, but I'm also been looking at other type of organizations, well-respected organizations, such as the World Economic Forum. And looking at what the World Economic Forum is saying on this topic, actually, the view of the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, Mr. Klaus Schwab, is that we stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. We do not yet know just how it will unfold, but one thing is clear: the response to it must be integrated and comprehensive, involving all stakeholders of the global polity, from the public and private sectors to academia and civil society. Looking at this very strong statement, as an operator, we need to prepare for the impact of the technological revolution. Another interesting and very well-respected organization is the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and it is an international organization that works to build better policies for better lives. Their goal is to shape policies that foster prosperity, equality, opportunity, and well-being for all. The OECD is an official United Nations observer. And in their perspective, the ongoing digital transformation holds the promise of improving productivity performance by enabling innovation and reducing the cost of a range of business processes. But at the same time, our economies have experienced a slowdown in productivity growth, sparkling a lively debate about the potential for digital technologies to boost productivity. The digital transformation is having a wide range impact on the business environment, and it creates both opportunities and challenges. Interrelated trends such as e-commerce, big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things could lead to large productivity gains for the economy. However, on the other hand, it also includes disruption to existing business and social models, as well as disruption of established markets, and it will disrupt also lives of millions of citizens. But to make the best of these changes, it is necessary to plan ahead. And from this necessity to plan ahead, I think we got inspired to start with 5G now. It's important to plan ahead so that the policies, institutions are in place as soon as possible. There is a collective need to pull together good analysis and evidence at the outset and to support the development of digital policy responses in areas such as competition, taxation, and trade. So when looking forward, after we have been reflecting and looking at what some of these well-respected organizations are saying, when looking forward at the start of this new decade, it is useful to look at what is on the horizon, especially on technology part. This is a very important exercise as the advancing rate of change and capabilities with technology is very dizzying. Many service providers face both digital transformation and transformation from 4G to 5G simultaneously. There are even some service providers who are in the stage of 3G to 4G. Global scale transformation initiatives are underway. As use cases of 5G services take shape, new service requirements for customer service are becoming apparent. Look at what is happening now with the pandemic. There is a whole new wave because of the pandemic with regard to how customers want to be treated. Within service delivery and recovery, for instance, immediacy is increasing. People work and study from home and cannot afford service interruption. And service providers must therefore work on improving processes and service quality methods. With the recent developments of oil and gas in Suriname, Suriname definitely will attract more foreign investors. And these investors are familiar with the latest technology developments. We will have to meet their needs and requirements. And based on this, we also recently drafted our strategic plan in such a way that we can be able to better cater to them. And for us, it is therefore important to be the trusted digital communications service partner. And we know we're not there yet, but we are working on it. That is the one reason we decided to have 5G available in the capital of Suriname, in Paramaribo. And I found it very interesting to listen to Tim's presentation and the speeds that are offered in the US. And I would like also to give you a brief demonstration of our 5G here in Suriname. Currently, I'm at the office in Paramaribo. I'm using speed test to do this test. And here you can see, put my phone a little bit closer, the speeds that we reach here with 5G in Suriname. Around 1 gig. And now you see the speed test for the upload speeds. This is not nationwide yet. We reached download speeds of 978 Mbps and around 80 Mbps upload speeds. We focus on the capital because there's a lot of commercial activity, and also the political center is located in the capital. But this is just one step that we made to decrease the digital divide with the developed countries, where most of our investors come from. So as a Caribbean nation with a lot of oil and gas, we want to attract foreign investment. To be able to cater to these current and potential customers, we must have solutions available that support their journey in digital transformation. I mentioned that there are a lot of implications on digital transformation. And I will start with I will start with implications on the business, for instance. We've seen that customers, I mentioned before, whether consumers or businesses, that they are increasingly at the epicenter of the economy, which is all about improving how customers are served. Physical products and services, moreover, can now be enhanced with digital capabilities that increase their value. New technologies make assets more durable and resilient, while data and analytics are transforming how they are maintained. A world of consumers, of customer experiences, data-based services, and asset performance through analytics, meanwhile, require new forms of collaboration, particularly given the speed at which innovation and disruption are taking place, and the emergence of global platforms and other new business models finally mean that talent, culture, and organizational forms will have to be rethought. Overall, the exorable shift from simple digitization, I refer to the third industrial revolution, to the innovation based on combinations of technologies related to the fourth industrial revolution, is forcing companies to re-examine the way they do business. This has also been a big part of our drafting of our strategic plan to be better able to serve future customers. The bottom line, however, is the same. Business leaders and senior executives need to understand their changing environment, challenge the assumptions of their operating teams, and relentlessly and continuously innovate. So I mentioned about the draft of the new strategic plan, and we focused on, we cannot be left out of the global digital future, and we need to secure our spot within that. We drafted the Suriname vision, and I will elaborate a little bit on that from our perspective. So you see in the middle, the yellow and blue, which are the company colors, and the green and the red is the country, related to the national flag. And within this ecosystem, we see ourselves as an enabler of high-speed broadband. And within this ecosystem, all types of e-services are possible, and we're in this ecosystem to facilitate these e-services. We are also participating in some of these e-services, for instance, e-payment, since we see that as the gasoline to boost this ecosystem, especially since there was not an e-payment solution available in the past. So, coming back to the question, when people ask me about why 5G now, well, 5G is part of the digital transformation. It is part of supporting the ecosystem I just explained to you. It is part of being able for investors to attract them. It is part of getting their attention that Suriname is a country that has the infrastructure in place to facilitate them as well in their digital transformation journey. So that was my presentation. So, and then if there are any questions, I would like to address them.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's the third of the three presenters. So let's have the gentleman back in. We have Mr. Tim Burke. He was followed by Mr. Giovanni King, and we just heard from Mike Antonius. So the three gentlemen are making themselves available for your questions. If you have not yet already done so, feel free to enter your question into the chat box. Mike, I think you're still sharing your screen, so we need you to cease your share. So that, there we are. So where we have everyone here. Tim, thank you so much for holding on. Giovanni, welcome back as well. And we just wrapped up with Mike, so we didn't allow him to leave. So he's here. So if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box. In the meantime, let's get the process underway. So I could toss this question out to generally all three gentlemen. What areas of life in the Caribbean would 5G technology most likely affect? Could we start with Mike? I'm seeing Mike chomping at the bit there.
The areas I expect 5G to be interesting in, especially in Suriname, is in oil and gas. We recently have a lot of oil and gas, like the case in Guyana, and we're attracting a lot of companies. So we definitely look at facilitating them. We do not expect a lot on the part of the mobile because of there are a lot of challenges still on the handsets. For instance, the iPhone 12, we cannot serve 5G services as of yet. We're still in contact with Apple regarding that part, but that is not the big market we're looking at or expecting to have in the future. It is more the business side, and especially the part of the foreign investors. And you cannot say like, okay, you need the mass first, because for the development in the country, it is necessary to be able to have some services that these investors are looking for.
Thank you very much, Mike. Giovanni, maybe I could toss this next question your way. It's from a regulatory perspective. Do you think, or are you satisfied that we're doing enough as a region to embrace this 5G revolution?
Thank you for the question. Well, again, from an aspect of preparing, I think, yes, we are making and we're, like Mike has just indicated, looking at where we can best implement so that you can support the business case. So with the regulators preparing the way, making the frequencies available, and as you know, there are working groups within the region supported, for instance, by CANTO and the CTU, where they are working on making sure that we are using our spectrum correctly, assigning and allocating it in a proper way so that this transition can be made. I think that when we're looking at the short-range developments, just as Mike has said, in Suriname, I think bridging the digital divide, making use of this technology, that is where I was on, let's say, the local perspective. That is where you will see changes coming in first.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. We have a question here from Chairman Cox, and he's actually presenting a position that I'm sure a lot of us on the end product would be wondering. Here's the question. As a user, does having these increased speeds really make any noticeable difference to your experience of streaming or using apps or of being online generally? Is there a threshold above which higher speeds make no real difference? Tim, I want to bring you in on this question.
Sure, thank you. Well, you know, I guess there is a limit on the higher speeds, but I mean, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Just, you know, working from home, a video conference like we're having right here. I mean, you know, fiber to the home provides gigabit per second speeds. If you could get close to that, you know, with the wireless services, it really opens up so many different things. I mean, you know, say children that are doing remote learning from home, you know, and their family doesn't have, you know, fiber to their home, they're in a rural area, whatever. But boy, if you could get, you know, 100 megabit type service, you know, so that multiple children can all stream to their different classes at home via a mobile device or, you know, their laptop or something along those lines is very, very useful. So, you know, I'm sure there is a limit. I don't see it ending anytime soon, you know, and then the compression technologies, whether it's audio or video, really helps, you know, as well that we see. But it just keeps going up and up, you know, the exponential growth on consumption that I showed in one of my charts. Same things with speeds. If I showed one on speeds, just keeps going up, 30% a year.
Thank you very much. We have some feedback here from Dr. Anvid Ramlakan. He says, thanks for the presentation, very interesting. I absolutely agree with you. This is me now agreeing with him. What are the biggest challenges faced during 5G implementation? What are the prospects for future technological innovation? And what happens after 5G? And what is the role of the operator making these technologies usable? Mike?
I want to start with a part of the role of 5G. And I think that we do not realize enough that 5G is the first mobile standard that is developed to not only support people communicating with other people, but also connecting the people with devices. And that part brings us to the Internet of Things as well. This is a part that in the Caribbean hasn't been very new. It's still very new to us, but in the developed countries, it is already there. So we still have to make go through that part of development, and you still at the moment you see here and there at some stores that you can buy some IoT ready devices or IoT ready electronics that you can use, for instance, within your house. And all these electronics can communicate and connect to the internet. So that is still in the preliminary stage here in Suriname. So with regard to the future, we will be seeing more of that within our economies. I cannot really imagine seeing a connected car on these roads in Suriname, because these roads are not like the highways in the US or in the developed countries, but it is also something that we can look forward to in the near future. So for all these devices, electronics to get connected, you need connectivity and good broadband connectivity. Are you waiting for me,
yes,
MC?
Mike, I want to hold on to you. We also have another contribution. Which 5G spectrum is being used in Suriname? This is a question coming from Christopher Taylor. He also wants to know, what is the cell size and coverage?
Okay, we use the 3.5 gigahertz frequency in Suriname, and we are mainly focused on, so that are the lower bands when we look at the presentation of Tim. The lower bands, these bands were available, and we are able to offer the speeds that I have demonstrated to you on these lower bands. So with regard to the sites, we do not have, like on the electric sites, the how you call them, near the roads. They are still a little bit further from the road, but still we are able to coverage the whole downtown area with it.
Thank you very much, Mike. We also have, let me see, Mr. Damian Blackburn. He's saying thank you for your insights and for each of the panelists for sharing your thoughts as well. I also want to move on to Anil Saduram. What are the end user advantages that Liberty brings to the table, being a cable company, versus what the traditional telecoms have to offer? What is the difference moving forward? That's the question. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Well, I mean, we're a fixed mobile convergence operator, so we can offer both mobile and fixed, so fiber to the home and 5G all in one package. And that is very advantageous, a single bill, you know, the full gamut of services, you know, whether it's TV, broadband, or mobile type services. And so we think that's very powerful. We think that's what customers like to see, you know, and we can even integrate these not only from a billing point of view, but also from the point of view where, you know, you're on a call or video conference and maybe you're, you know, and you have it, you know, via Wi-Fi, fiber to the home, and then you go outside and that call, that connection continues into the mobile cellular environment. And the speeds don't vary, you know, I mean, because you still got very high speeds in the mobile broadband type of services. And so that is a very advantageous thing that we like to offer to all our customers. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much, Tim. Damian Blackburn.
Did that come through?
Sorry? Yes, you did. We are having quite a number of questions coming in. This is just a reminder to each and every one of you that the discussion doesn't end in the segment. We can make use of the platform to continue engaging our presenters and each other as we move forward. However, in this segment, we have time for one more question. And I'm going back to Damian Blackburn. His question, in relation to allocation of spectrum for 5G in the region, what is the panel's recommendation as to the process that the regulators should use and why? Maybe we can start here with Giovanni.
I think one of the things that we're doing correctly already is trying to create a level of harmonization. There are these harmonization meetings going on that has been taking place for a long time already. So especially when it comes to preventing interference and making sure that all of the available spectrum could be used in an efficient way, I think that is already a very good path that we're following. In addition to that, one of the things that we always do in Curacao is that look at what the global society is doing and not necessarily pick and decide to follow, for instance, what the US is doing from the get-go. For instance, we did that with the LTE rollout. The reason we did that because when we look at the handset development, the frequencies that were being used at that time was what was being used in the global society and not particularly in the US. So I would say that would be a good strategy to follow. Continue with what we're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, my thoughts on spectrum is you know, it has to be economical for the operator, the price that the operator pays for the spectrum. As I mentioned, you know, it's they're low ARPU revenue countries, and operators need to invest lots of CapEx and OpEx to build out these networks. And so the spectrum has to be reasonably priced, and you need to have it for a long period of time. And that's just so important because it is expensive to deploy these new technologies. So I think fair pricing on the spectrum for longer periods of time, so there's that kind of assurance that they're going to have that spectrum for a long period of time, is really, really important for an operator. Obviously, as I mentioned, as you go into this 5G in my presentation, I was talking about large chunks of that spectrum. You know, you need to have those large chunks, and you need those large blocks of it, and you need to have a mix of the low frequencies to give you that range. You know, if you're out in rural areas and tough foliage areas like Suriname, and then you need to have the high frequencies that's going to give you those capacities and speeds. So that combination is a nice sweet spot for operators.
Thank you very much, Tim. As we get set to wrap this up, Mike, I don't know if you have any closing words.
Sorry, can you please repeat that?
I'm allowing you just a couple of seconds to wrap us up before we move on.
Oh, yes, okay. So actually for us as from Telesur, we are preparing also for the 5G revolution. And you cannot only prepare by studying, you must also be active and participate in that specific market. So we started with 5G on the 3.5 gig for our downtown area, and we're closely monitoring the industry and what is happening in the industry. But for us, it was something that was important to do, especially since we don't want to be, we want to decrease the digital divide and being able to better contribute to the growth of our economy.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks again, Tim. Thank you, Giovanni. It has been a lively discussion. Thank you for all that information. Thank you for sharing your time with us this afternoon. Well, my friends, again, I implore you, do not allow the conversation to just end with the presentations and the short Q&A that time has permitted. You can continue to engage all our presenters in the networking lounge. Over the course of the 2 days, we take advantage of each and every opportunity to stay connected and to stay engaged as we advance the issue of 5G.